Thank you so much, sir. I thank Professor Malik and Dr. Ruchi for including me in this very important and very relevant IC. So, I'll be talking about diabetic retinopathy with concomitant cataract, the role of OCT macula, and anti-VEGF. So, cataract surgery in diabetics or in patients with diabetic retinopathy is something we all commonly encounter. It's important to remember that the systemic parameters should be controlled not just for the wound healing but also for the post-op infection. You can be faced with poor pupillary dilatation in diabetics. As we all know, we prefer acrylic IOLs, though toric can be put, but multifocal should be avoided even if there is no diabetic retinopathy. The use of perioperative topical NSAIDs has been shown to statistically affect the outcome positively in terms of the central subfoveal thickness, and perioperative, this means that they should be started preoperatively. As we know, these cases also have a higher incidence of PCO, so a good cortical cleanup, capsular polishing, and preferably by an experienced surgeon can take care of this. Now, what is most important for us and what has been the theme of this IC as well is the suboptimal visual gain and how we as caregivers can either reduce this or prepare the patient for this so that there is no post-op surprise. And of course, as opposed to routine cataract surgery, in diabetics, it's important to counsel them that even though the cataract surgery has been done, they need continued follow-up for either the management or even the development of diabetic retinopathy. So, I'll start with the role of OCT, and OCT gives us both quantitative as well as qualitative information in diabetics. I'll go as far as to say that if the facility is available, then all diabetics must have an OCT, irrespective of the presence of diabetic retinopathy. This means that even if you feel the patient has no diabetic retinopathy, there may be 3-4 microaneurysms at the fovea which are not visible due to the cataract, and they may be causing diabetic macular edema. So, if the facility is available, definitely OCT macula should be done in all patients who have diabetes. Now, as you can see, these two eyes of the same patient, what we are interested in quantitatively is the central subfoveal thickness. So, this here is spared in the right eye, in the left eye it is not spared. So, this makes the distinction between center sparing or center involving diabetic macular edema, which has a bearing on our management. Of course, OCT can be used for serial follow-up, and it also gives us qualitative information regarding the type of edema. Here, currently what is important is the posterior hyaloid traction, in which case vitrectomy may be required. So, it is better to refer to your retina colleague because they may want to plan a combined cataract surgery and a vitrectomy for such kind of patients. The others can be managed medically. So, as we know, there is a modest correlation between the visual acuity and the OCT parameters. This means that a greater macular thickness does not always correspond with a worse visual acuity. So, then what is it on OCT that we can use to prognosticate our patients? It is these three layers, the ISOS junction and the external limiting membrane. If they are continuous, the patient is likely to have a better visual prognosis after treatment of the macular edema. So, just to summarize, OCT in diabetics gives us quantitative information as in the central subfoveal thickness. In India, we usually take 300 as the cutoff currently. It gives us qualitative information where most important is the presence of vitreoretinal traction, in which case patient might need surgery, and it tells us about the morphology of the edema. And thirdly, the OCT biomarkers, which give us an idea about the visual gain after diabetic retinopathy treatment, which also translates into the visual gain following cataract surgery. So, here you can see this is an enlarged photograph of the layers and presence of drill, which can also be a prognostic indicator. So, at this point, I'd like to say that fluorescein angiography is desirable to be done in all cases with diabetic retinopathy. Why? First of all, it may point towards ischemic maculopathy, though OCTA can also give us this information, but lack of availability may necessitate a fluorescein angiography. And this again is important so that there is no post-operative surprise of poor visual gain, and then you come to know that the patient has in fact ischemic maculopathy. So, in mild to moderate amounts of cataract, fluorescein angiography will give this information and should be done pre-op rather than post-op. Secondly, if there is any suspicion of neovascularization, as in I'll show you a case which looked even like moderate NPDR, but on fluorescein there were multiple NVEs. These patients can even have developed vitreous hemorrhage following cataract surgery because of the PVD induction which happens during cataract surgery. So again, it is better to find this out sooner rather than later, so that you can prime the patient, and it shouldn't be that after a nicely done cataract surgery patient presents with vitreous hemorrhage and he is not aware of his condition. And finally, if there are any non-responders to your management of macular edema. So this is a patient with ischemic maculopathy. Again, I want to stress on systemic control, and here I also want to talk about vitamin D supplementation, which I feel is very under prescribed, especially by ophthalmologists, and it has a statistically proven bearing on the incidence as well as progression of diabetic retinopathy. So when the patient comes with cataract or has cataract surgery, this is a good opportunity to check for this parameter and add the supplementation in conjunction with the physician. So the second part of my talk is anti-VEGF therapy. I'll take the liberty of adding steroids also to the list. In 2025, these are the drugs we have at our disposal. I have not included the biosimilars because there are 6-7 available now, so there is a list all by itself. I think as doctors dealing primarily with cataract, it is basically the first two which are used, and possibly the last three would be more in the armamentarium of retina specialists. So these are the ones which I see being commonly given along with cataract surgery. Now here I want to highlight one or two things about anti-VEGF. So of late there have been many reports of anti-VEGF causing decline in renal function, which we were not talking about that much earlier, or maybe not even diagnosing. And I have had in fact patients come back from physicians with the note that anti-VEGF injection in the eye should not be given in view of the kidney parameters. So we were all taking history of MI and CVA and thromboembolic events, but the KFT is another thing we need to keep in mind. Now steroids, as I was talking about, are a very attractive option in our patients with cataract who are anyway going to undergo cataract surgery. So we can, take the advantage of a longer acting injection in these cases. Also, persistent suboptimal response to anti-VEGF can indicate that you need to use a steroid, or like I said, systemic conditions, cardiovascular as well as renal. So at present we most commonly use Ozurdex. TA use has declined due to increased glaucoma over the years. Now here about Ozurdex, the point I want to highlight is that it must not be used, of course, if the patient is aphakic, but also if there is a PC rent, because there are many reports of anterior migration of the implant, and in fact the inset which comes with the drug also says that it is contraindicated in patients who do not have an intact posterior capsule. So now coming to the last part of my talk, the treatment algorithm. We know what is available, but what to do in a particular patient. More number of options has not necessarily helped us. In fact, it might have increased our uncertainties. So I'll try to simplify this as much as it can. So diabetic patients are not only more liable to develop cataracts, but they are also predisposed to poorer visual acuity and higher risk of intra-op as well as post-op complications. This is a subset which may have suboptimal visual gain and in general dissatisfaction if they've not been counseled earlier. So the first question you should ask is that, is the amount of cataract commensurate with the visual acuity? As experienced cataract surgeons, all of you can make out whether the visual acuity is explained by the amount of cataract or not. If not, it should necessitate a careful fundus examination, and like I said, a much lower threshold for OCT than you would have in non-diabetics, because it may be a seemingly normal fundus which appears to you, but they still might be having center involving diabetic macular edema. Also, for medico-legal purposes, for documentation, a pre-op OCT I feel is a must. The second point which I want to drive here is that the diabetic retinopathy should be treated before the cataract surgery. As I mentioned earlier, there is an increasing trend to do it alongside, to give the anti-VEGF along with the cataract surgery. However, the RCTs have shown that the better result is seen if the diabetic retinopathy is treated prior to the cataract surgery, and then only the cataract surgery is done. So we'll talk more about this a little later. The reason for this is diabetic retinopathy itself can progress following cataract surgery, and if there has been DME in the past or not been there also, just 1 minute more, sorry, it can recur after cataract surgery. So these are the clinical situations we encounter. This is my last slide, I think. There can be cataract with non-center involving DME, in which case the patient usually we advise laser. There can be cataract with center involving DME. In this case, please treat with anti-VEGF or steroids first. And cataract surgery should only be done once the macula is dry. So the combined treatment we do only if the cataract is significant enough that you are unable to visualize or photograph the fundus or even perform OCT. If there is cataract and proliferative diabetic retinopathy, again the laser should be done first, with or without anti-VEGF, depending on the amount of macular edema. If laser is not possible, then you can do the cataract surgery with anti-VEGF followed by a laser, and all this should be explained to the patient beforehand. So for example, this patient presented with cataract looked to have moderate NPDR but actually had multiple NVEs. There was no center involving macular edema. Prior to cataract surgery, the entire PRP was done and the macula was still dry, and only after, you can see even with the photograph that the cataract is not that much that it precludes your retinal treatment, and only once the retina is stable then you proceed with the cataract surgery, otherwise there is a risk of vitreous hemorrhage as well. So last point here, sometimes in diabetics it is difficult to differentiate whether it is pseudophakic macular edema or a diabetic macular edema happening. So 2 points can help you here. The first is a fluorescein angiogram. If the disc is also hot in the absence of NVD, then it is most likely a pseudophakic macular edema. And secondly, if you see lot of hard exudates, then it is more likely a diabetic macular edema. So to summarize, all diabetics found to have cataract must undergo detailed fundus evaluation as well as OCT. If they have center involving DME, it's better to treat the edema first and plan cataract surgery once the macula is dry. Ideally, 2 consecutive OCTs should show that the macula is dry. And we must counsel the patient regarding continued follow-up for diabetic retinopathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you know the importance of the subject.